Wilderness is a place that takes the majority of people out of their familiar environment. And all of a sudden, you have to learn to rely on your own abilities.
It's where I go to reconnect and find that solitude.
And the landscape processes can go on their own terms.
We've got more landscape to allow fire to spread and assume its natural role as an ecosystem process.
My name is Raina Phillips, and I work as a wilderness ranger on the Middle Fork Ranger District, and I've worked in the wilderness professionally for 15 years now, and before that went in a lot recreationally, even growing up in Montana. And then I've been a firefighter type 2 for all of those 15 years. It's been a collateral duty, but I've done everything from dig line to provide resource advisor duties to certain fires. Experienced a lot of wilderness fire over those years, and we have some skills that really transfer from working on the wilderness trails to helping manage the fires in the wilderness. So.
Raina, can you share what wilderness means to you?
I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is that wilderness is a refuge, not only for the people that might come here to recreate and experience the unconfined nature of this landscape, but also for the anadromous salmon that have a very genetically unique strain up here in this river, and the other animals and plants that live here, and the landscape processes can go on their own terms, and we have a tremendous opportunity to preserve that genetic diversity and observe those natural processes and how they interact with one another here in wilderness. One of those natural processes being fire.
I'm Les Bechtel, and I live in McCall, Idaho. I've been running the Middle Fork since 1985. My wife and I had a river business where we took people down on 6-day trips. We did that for 25 years, and we sold the business, and I found out I just couldn't quit the Middle Fork. And I was able to get a job as a river ranger, floating every other week on patrol. I've been doing that. It's my 5th year doing that.
That's just in real general and personal terms. What does wilderness mean to you?
Wilderness is a place that takes the majority of people out of their familiar environment, which is usually a city, and puts them in a different kind of environment, and where you don't have the comforts of air conditioning or the convenience of a police department around the corner or your cell phone doesn't work. And all of a sudden, you have to learn to rely on your own abilities and the proper planning, taking the right clothing, going down the river at the right level of your skill, capabilities, all that. I think wilderness serves a great tool to help people better learn about themselves and take care of themselves.
My name is Matt Galliard. I'm the Assistant Operations Foreman with the McCall Smoke Jumpers. And I've been jumping for the last 14 years. I've also got a Master's of Forestry from the University of Montana. And prior to that, I was on the Lolo Hot Shots and LeGrand Hot Shots. And I started my career on a district, on the Lyle Whitman on an engine at a Halfway, Oregon. And I've spent a couple seasons on the 9 Mile Ranger District of the Lolo National Forest as well. You know, fires in the wilderness have a luxury that a lot of other fires don't, and they have space to move without impacting values or structures at risk, whether it be homes or stands of timber that may be set for commercial harvesting. And so in the wilderness area, fire is allowed to play its natural role in the ecosystem. Fire is as natural as rain and snow, and it's a weather event. And so there's so many species of trees, forbs, grasses, and then related wildlife and whatnot. Everything's connected, and all those have grown and evolved and adapted with fire. And so when you take fire out of the mix, it's taking a critical structure out of the ecosystem. And so by allowing fire to play its natural role, we're allowing that ecosystem to be whole. And in the wilderness areas, particularly the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness, it's the largest wilderness area in the lower 48, there's an opportunity to allow fire to do what it's done for thousands and millions of years. So even though we allow fire to do its thing in the wilderness, we can't turn our backs to it as wildland managers. And so the reason being the forest lands and the wilderness areas are managed for multiple uses. So we have a lot of folks recreating and using the wilderness and that land base for their enjoyment and also for their business. So you've got river outfitters providing trips down wild and scenic rivers to the wilderness areas to their clients, and those clients are folks that have come, sometimes thousands of miles to experience a wild environment. And you've got folks out there hunting, you've got outfitters guiding the hunters, and so the challenge is to allow fire to move around on the landscape and play its natural role, while at the same time minimizing the impact to the users of the area. And so you're utilizing multiple objectives, and in order to balance that out and to earn the public's trust and the user's trust, you need to put firefighters into the wilderness to monitor the fires, to anticipate where the fire is going to be moving and how that may be impacting heavily used recreational areas, such as river corridors or areas that receive a lot of visitation from backpackers. And then as you move into the hunting season, where there's a lot of hunting traffic, how can you allow fire to do its thing while at the same time letting people still access the area? And it's important to do that because the more you do that, the more you can educate the users of the wilderness area to what fire is doing out there on the landscape, the benefits it's providing, and it gets people used to the fact that fire is a natural event. And when you go out into the wilderness and experience the wildness of a landscape like a wilderness area, there are times that you have to adapt and live with fire.
My name's Benjamin Farrick. I work on the Teton Fire Module out of the Bridger Teton National Forest and Grand Teton National Park. I've been working on the crew for 3 years now.
What's the difference between the actions you take on a fire in the wilderness versus a fire elsewhere?
The biggest difference is that oftentimes in wilderness fires we do very little suppression. A lot of times we're doing info gathering, mapping, taking a lot of weather, doing FEMO observations in order to feed good information back to the home unit and the overhead of that fire. Very often those fires are being managed for resource benefit, and we're trying to do as little impact the area as little as possible. So often not putting tools to the ground, using natural barriers, or predicting fire growth and spread, and deciding whether or not that fire can be managed further or whether it needs to be suppressed here or there, doing point protection in order to protect values that might be at risk. Well, other fires that may not be in wilderness areas, oftentimes we are doing full suppression on those in order to protect economic values like timber stands, or we're protecting travel, roads, infrastructure like power lines and water sources and pump houses, and on top of all that, people's homes, private residences.
My name is Chuck Mark. I'm the Forest Supervisor for the San Miguel National Forest. My resource background and training is silviculture and fire management. I've been in fire management all my career. I've worked on fire management teams and incident management teams. I was a fire behavior analyst, long-term fire analyst, fire manager for many years. Gone into line. I've been a line officer now for going on 12 years. And when the wilderness, Frank Church River No Return Wilderness was established in 1980, one of the charges in that legislation was put together a wilderness management plan. And so the fire management direction did change in regards to wanting to promote as best as possible, given values at risk, things of that nature, lightning-caused fires as a natural ecosystem process. And it wasn't fully adopted until 2003.
So even today, when and why would we send people in on wilderness fires?
There's a couple, one, I think, obvious reason why we would take action on a wilderness fire from the standpoint of suppression would be as if there would be an imminent threat to a value at risk. I think the first place comes is in some certain border areas. We've got values at risk just outside the wilderness, in regards to private property, structures, things of that nature. But there's other reasons that we would take, we would expose firefighters in regards to managing a fire back there, and that would be just from the standpoint of managing the fires. Most recently here with the Middle Fork complex this summer 2015, in which we were managing the river and closing campsites, opening campsites, mitigating fire effects to campsites. There we're exposing firefighters. But we intentionally take those management actions to, one, reduce the impacts from the fire on the campsites in regards to retaining some sort of tree cover and shade, and also then trying to promote the safety of the river users and keep the river open. And so from that standpoint, constant river patrols help us do that.
My name's Sean Cronin. I'm a smoke jumper out of McCall, Idaho. This is my 9th season in Wildland Fire. I started off on a hand crew. From there I went to an engine, got on several other hotshot crews, moved on to a rappel helicopter platform, and just started jumping after that.
When you are assigned to these wilderness fires, what's a typical day like?
A typical day on a fire in the wilderness is more involved with recording the fire's activity and behavior, what distances it's traveled, the behavior of the fire, what fuel types it's getting into, what drainages it might be getting into, habitat areas that might be affecting, going to maybe old structures or maybe points of interest and putting in protection line around those, or recording those areas for the management of that wilderness area. If you are doing anything with the fire itself, we usually engage what's called MISS tactics, minimal impact suppression tactics. We're going in there just putting in small amounts of handline where it's needed. And then on top of that, once the fire is under control or whatever the management, once management has it in the proper situation that they want that fire to be in, we'll go back even and rehab those certain sections of the fire that we put in handline and whatnot.
My name is Tara Moraga. I started fire in 2004 on a Type 2 20-person hand crew. I was there for 2 years, then I did 4 on a Type 1 hotshot crew in Arizona, and then I went back up to Region 1 and did another 2 years on a hotshot crew there. And I've been here at the McCall Jump Base since 2012. So last year we jumped the Eagle Cap Wilderness, incredibly beautiful wilderness, just really high mountains that go all the way down to drainages which meet up to gorgeous rivers. And we went up at the beginning to start monitoring, and it was pushing deeper into the wilderness, which they were happy with. But we pretty much just had to point protect the back side of it to make sure that it didn't continue towards nearby towns. And that's pretty much what we spent our time with, checking up certain parts of the back side of the heel, and then just monitoring the front and seeing its forward progression each day.
I'm Sammy Chanel. I'm currently a fuels tech on the George Washington Jefferson National Forest in Virginia, and I'm detailed to the Teton Interagency Wildland Fire Module for the summer. Head down the middle fork of the Salmon. We broke up into two different squads of the module, and we were at 2 different fires along the river. And every day we would take a different hike every day, but we would get to a good vantage point where we could see the fire. We could watch the fire activity, report back to the IC or to division what we were seeing. But one of our biggest objectives was the safety of the public. That's a world-class rafting river, and it's the livelihood of a lot of the communities around here. And to make sure that the campgrounds along the river were open, we had to make sure that there weren't any trees that were burning that were going to compromise any of those campgrounds or people on the river. And so that was one of the biggest objectives that we had was making sure that that rafting community could continue with their work, but that they could do it safely with the fires going on.
My name is Nara Brunson, and I started with the Forest Service in 1999 on a fire crew out of Dixie. And then I was doing it summer seasonally, and I came and switched into wilderness in 2001, and I started on the Middle Fork Ranger District as a trail crew member in the Frank. And from there, I became a wilderness ranger. Currently, I am a wilderness ranger on the Middle Fork.
How has fire affected the Frank Church wilderness?
A lot of it has been burnt. If you look at a map, it's astounding to see how much of it has been burnt. And I heard the statistic here, 50% of this river canyon's been burnt in the last 10 years. You experience fire a lot in the Frank, but it's beautiful to see because you can see the transitions. I mean, you see the beauty of it, and you see the forests coming back. I find fire landscape a beautiful, beautiful thing, especially the fire up here. You can tell that they've let the fire come in and burn. I mean, just was it 2 years ago, the other side burnt. I also found it interesting with these fires in particular. When you looked at the map, almost all of them were re-burning in places that have already had fire in them. And you can really tell when you're looking up at the slope and it's just a ground fire. It's not going through and just torching everything.
What should the public be aware of when they're entering wilderness areas during the warmer months of the year in terms of fire?
Well, I think the main thing to emphasize is that there's always a chance that lightning could strike near you and start a wildfire. You always need to be prepared, have your itinerary, on file with somebody back home, and they know where to expect you and where you're going to be. I also think it's very important to use your instincts, and the main thing would just be to respect the possibility that the fire could put you in danger, and the effects of the fire could also, affect where you should choose to camp and how you travel. And there may be times when we close areas to protect your safety and let the fire burn and do its thing. After a fire's come through an area, we also have quite a bit of reason to be heads up about traveling in those areas, just from a standpoint of snags and rolling rocks and destabilized soil and that type of thing.
How can you allow fire to do its thing while at the same time letting people still access the area? And it's important to do that because you can educate the users of the wilderness area what fire is doing out there on the landscape, the benefits it's providing. And it gets people used to the fact that fire is a natural event, and when you go out into the wilderness and experience the wildness of a landscape like a wilderness area, there are times that you have to adapt and live with fire.